Hello everyone and welcome to SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guest we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you do follow the podcast so you don't miss any of our future episodes. I'm delighted today to be joined by Yasmin Awad, Senior Vice President and Head of SAP's Global User Groups Organisation, and Philip Adams, UKISUG Board Member and SUGEN SEAL Team Member. So welcome to the both of you.
Thank you for the invitation, Craig.
It's great to have you both.
It's great to be back on another podcast.
It hasn't been long, has it, Philip? It hasn't been long. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into SUGEN, or the SAP User Group Executive Network, as it's known, and looking at what it is, how SAP works with user groups around the world, and how the global network shapes SAP's roadmap on behalf of customers. And just before we get into that, I'd just like to ask you both, what's one thing you wish that had never been invented? While you have a think about that one, when this landed across me about 15 minutes ago, I thought, oh dear, this is a tough one, this. And my thought immediately went to something, it's probably not an invention as such, but it's something that came really to fruition during COVID to avoid person-to-person contact and these things that have hung around, avoiding the need for more staff, etc. For instance, supermarkets and that aggressive expansion of self-checkouts, which reduced staffing but also reduced human interaction. So that's one of the things that really, from my perspective. So, Philip.
I really am stuck with this one. I would say it probably varies from day to day of what's most frustrating in your day. As when I look at my kids and trying to get them off devices, I think I wish they had never been invented. But invariably, we all need them in our lives and they do bring advantages. I'm really struggling with this one. I don't think I wish. Now I'd have to say there probably isn't a single thing that I wish hadn't been invented. I just wish things would be used appropriately. If I can get away with that one.
That's a great point. Yeah, I'll allow that one. Thank you, Philip. Yasmin, anything to add?
I'm so glad you didn't point me first. I also thought about it because this is so difficult, because also, as you mentioned, Philip, some technical innovation like the devices are not always the best because they also disrupt us from personal communication, for example. So I thought about this but didn't pick it because it helps us to innovate. But I picked an easy one. I would have hoped weapons would not have invented, at least the weapons where you really harm people. And I think if they wouldn't have been invented, everything would be much more peaceful.
I like that. Thank you, Yasmin. I do like that. But I think, I took an easy way out. And I think, Philip, you expanded on that as well, because, of course, we could probably wax lyrical about this for quite some time. You talk about devices, we think about social media, the positive and negative aspects and usage appropriately, I think, is a key element to all of that. But we'll swiftly move on. And Yasmin, just to start, please could you introduce yourself to our audience and the role of the Global User Groups Organisation at SAP?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Yasmin Awad and I'm with SAP for more than 25 years now. I started in the SAP field organization in Germany. So I'm also based in Walldorf in the SAP headquarter. I started in the field organization in various customer-facing roles. And then I moved to a global responsibility. I started to work for our CEO at that time. Then I moved on and became responsible for strategy and operations of our executive board member, who was the COO at that time. And then I started in my current role And I'm now responsible for the SAP Global User Groups organization already for 10 years. And this means that I'm responsible for managing the relationship and the collaboration and all major activities between SAP and the user groups globally. We are a team of about 30 people, which really shows the commitment of SAP towards the user groups. And the team is on the one side, the bigger part of the team is responsible for managing the relationship between SAP and the user groups in the respective countries. So we have more than 40 user groups globally, and we collaborate with them. We, of course, we help them to grow because they are a very important partner for SAP, and we establish a governance to make sure that there's a constant dialogue between SAP and each user group. Because the user groups, and this is really a strategic role for SAP, they do not only represent SAP customers in the respective countries, but they also help SAP to review and improve our go-to-market, our product development, and provide valuable feedback to our strategy. They help SAP to stay close to market needs and customers to stay close to innovation. So it's really bidirectional, and it creates value not only for SAP but also for our customers.
Oh, thank you, Yasmin. And I think, when I reflect on it and I look at how SAP works with us, I think I'm probably right in saying SAP is quite unique in this way. I don't see other major, if you like, software vendors, etc. So if we look at the likes of Oracle, Microsoft, etc., don't work with customers in this way.
I agree. We also do not see something that is comparable in with other software vendors, not only in terms of the investment of the software vendor. We do not only invest into my team, but also into the local contacts that we establish in the respective countries with SAP organization. This shows a huge commitment, but also the connection with our SAP executives and experts to ensure that we have a constant dialogue on our product solutions, on our services, and how we approach the market. But it's also unique if we look at the commitment from our customers and the passion that they show. The user groups, as you of course know, is a community where people invest their voluntary time into SAP and into the way how they adopt SAP and how they can improve the value of SAP they get in their companies. But the most important thing is they do this for their voluntary time. So all the board members, all the SIG leads, they invest their time to help SAP to improve the solutions, but also help other customers to adopt the software in the best possible way. And we are really, really proud of having such a great community that helps us to improve our solutions, but also help the customers to maximize the value of SAP.
Thank you for that. And I think that's a great lead into Philip, really, as one of those very, passionate volunteers. And Philip, you were on a recent episode wearing your UKISUG board member hat. This time we'd like to focus a little bit more on your involvement in SUGEN and being part of the core leadership team. What does that involve?
Yeah, great question. Essentially, it is an extension to a certain extent of the board role within UKISUG. But I want to be clear that, the SUGEN is a network of user groups, and members of SUGEN are all equal. So being a member on the core leadership team doesn't give you any different privileges or voting rights or anything to that effect. But it is important for such a growing and large organisation, and with the commitment, as Yasmin has just said, that SAP has put into this, that we do have a structure. And we do have, and as we grow, we need to make sure we maintain that structure. So being a member of the core leadership team is really about, like every other member should do, is promoting the good work that SUGEN does amongst the community. It's to help facilitate communication amongst the members, manage the affairs of the network in line with our core operational guidelines, assisting Yasmin and her team in terms of planning, organising, running the various activities that allow SUGEN to be as effective as it needs to be, to focus on those strategic and relevant topics. And we ultimately do this through a series of fortnightly meetings. We have face-to-face meetings twice a year, and in combination with Yasmin's great team, it's important that core leadership team work in tandem with them to make those successful, so that, as you say, all the volunteers from the different user groups that are part of SUGEN get the most out of it in terms of the time and commitment they have, but also the value that they can bring back to their individual members.
Thank you. And Yasmin, so from you mentioned some of the areas, where SAP works with user groups in SUGEN, and also the investment SAP makes in your organisation, etc. So from SAP's point of view, why does SAP invest in a structured global user group network, and what does SAP get out of it?
Yeah, because they are simply really, really important for us. That's also the reason why we really want the user groups to grow and to constantly grow and also move into the new direction. Because user groups initially come from the on-premise world, now we talk more about cloud, and we help the user groups to also grow in this direction, because we see that the user groups are getting more and more important for our customers. And at SAP, of course, the customer success is at the center of everything we do, right? If the customers are not successful, there's no reason for SAP to exist or to provide solutions. So the user groups are an important part for us to ensure that our products, our innovations, and our strategy align with the customer needs. And through the dialogue with the user groups, we really understand the market needs better. We understand better what customers need to adopt our innovation, to understand our strategy. Sometimes, of course, the feedback also includes the needs of customers where we can be better. And through the dialogue with the user groups, we can understand that. We get a consolidated feedback from a specific country. And even if we talk about SUGEN, even the perspective from all the world, and not only the perspective from one single customer. And this helps us to provide better solutions, to improve the product quality, in many cases, the way how we approach customers, meaning the go-to-market and the communication. And sometimes it also helps us to solve country-specific issues that we face, for example, through reorganizations or things like that. So it's not only about the product quality that we improve through the collaboration with the user groups, but also the way how we approach the markets. And so in every way how SAP gets to the customer is something that we discuss with the user groups, and where the user groups really help us. And that's why the user groups are a very important partner for us, and why we invest into the collaboration with the user groups, and of course into the success of the user groups.
Thank you. You mentioned there, obviously, understanding SAP's strategy, and also feedback perhaps on where SAP could do better. So when user groups perhaps push back hard on SAP's direction, how does that land internally, and how does that feedback get replayed back through SAP?
Yeah, so of course we take the feedback of the user groups very seriously, especially if it sometimes challenges our direction. So the open dialogue is really key for us, and we really try to sense this very early. So ideally, we also do not reach the point where user groups really have to push hard. I would say most of the topics are really solved very early because not only through my team, but also through the engagement of SAP in other areas, the collaboration with the user groups, we establish constant dialogues. We validate our plans very early. Of course, we share information, but we also discuss plans in a closed cycle where we validate our plans and get the feedback as early as possible, and then we try to incorporate this. We also, for example, when we do an announcement, we involve the user groups very early. We validate our communication strategy, we validate our plans, and really try to incorporate the feedback from the user groups very early. And you have to see that the feedback is not the same all over the world. We have also different customer groups, not only different market expectations, but also different customer groups with different landscapes in the background. So it is really important for us to get this consolidated perspective. So ideally, we really try to avoid issues, sense things very early through a governance process that we have with the user groups, and here we talk about our strategy and solutions, about our service portfolio. We talk about our go-to-market approach and any other structural issues. But of course, sometimes SAP does not always echo the expectations of all these customers. And here we really try to incorporate the feedback from the user groups and solve it. And if it gets harder, that's okay, that's fair, right? You represent the customers. Sometimes we do not all have the same opinion, or we do not solve all the customer groups equally, but it's our interest to serve them in the best possible way and find the best possible solution. And that's why the feedback from the user groups can never be hard enough, because if we talk, and that's the same in every other relationship, if you address issues and if you talk, you typically find a solution.
Thank you. Yeah, that thing, one of the things you said there right at the beginning is extremely important, and that is keeping that open dialogue. That is crucial to it all. And, Philip, for listeners who perhaps only know SUGEN as a name or heard it in passing or whatever, can you talk us through how it operates?
Yeah, sure. So, like a lot of what we've just touched on, SUGEN is really all about a mechanism for feedback to SAP. It's about advocacy, it's about knowledge transfer, and it's about influence and so forth. So really, in terms of our operational organization, it's making sure that we have a mechanism that facilitates those things. And ultimately, because it's made up of user groups from around the globe, we need to ensure that we keep in touch with what's going on in those different market units and look for the areas that are common and we can collaborate together on. So we do that through monthly calls. So there's one hour each month that we all have a call. It's not unstructured, it is very structured. There's an agenda put together based on various topics which are relevant to that global network. And we'll have speakers and guests join those calls to provide knowledge transfer, to ask questions and have Q&A so that we can gather the feedback and create that element of advocacy. We also have then twice a year face-to-face meetings, because there's no better way, I suppose, that when we all come together that we can network, and even off script per se, outside of agenda opportunities, there's lots of networking breaks where you can collaborate and exchange ideas and share knowledge, and look for those opportunities where we have common challenges, common opportunities that we can collaborate closely, either as individual market units within the SAP ecosystem, but also with SAP. Those face-to-face meetings run over 3 days, and part of that will be best practice sessions. Each user group has an operation in their own right, and it's important that each user group really strives for success, and we can learn from each other in terms of how we operate and provide the various services back to our members. Within the face-to-face meetings, we'll focus on internal topics whereby we look to improve how SUGEN operates, and we'll have exchanges with the executives right across the SAP area, from Christian Klein right down through the organisation on the key topics and so forth. And when we have very strong strategic initiatives identified, we will often deal with those through projects which we call charters, which are very formal structures where there'll be a sponsorship. There'll be sponsorship from SAP, sponsorship within SUGEN. The teams will be pulled together, and we'll clearly define objectives, deliverables, and what we want to achieve so that we can add value back to the entire membership. So it's really making sure within our principles and guidelines that we create that forum for, to a certain extent, very structured feedback, advocacy, knowledge transfer and influence, but also having that ability to do it somewhat ad hoc when we have networking breaks and so forth when we meet together.
Thank you.
We know our community, but we don't know yours yet. Why not share the benefits of your UKISUG membership with those who don't know about us? The UKISUG referral scheme rewards you for helping to grow and develop our community. You can check out the link in the description to find out more about how you can get involved. Terms and conditions apply. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And I think an important point of this is, we're representing from, if we look at it from a UKISUG perspective, we're representing our community, our members, the customer community across the UK and Ireland. And we're not just going there thinking about one specific customer issue, etc. It's a community. So how does a topic perhaps go from being a theme raised across the community to SUGEN is formally working with SAP on it, i.e., as you mentioned, strategic initiative, a charter, etc. How do you test something that's to make sure it's more of a widespread issue and not just a single customer requirement?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, ultimately, generally, we hope that when a topic is raised by an individual user group, it's a burning issue certainly within their market, and if generally during the face-to-face meetings or during other opportunities, those will come to fruition, either through a conversation over a coffee or as a result of feedback per se during the internal discussions or whatever. And often that will be filtered through to either to the CLT, or it might just crop up at a regular call or meeting and so forth. And generally, you look to seek, how much of an issue is that globally, or is it particularly focused towards a particular market unit? And those will vary, but generally, you will get a good sense of how important that is. And then there'll be further conversations with the Global User Group Office to understand, are they seeing that within other areas, and how can we work together to resolve that? And there's different mechanisms. If it's very strategic, very focused, well then ultimately, as I said, we would generally form a charter to work on that, or it could be something that could be just dealt with and managed during feedback at a face-to-face meeting. So it really probably depends on how significant it is, how global it is, or is it very localized to a particular market unit.
Thank you. And so if we look at kind of priorities from a UK and Ireland perspective, how do they tend to align with the rest of the world, and perhaps other areas in which they diverge?
Yeah, like we obviously we have within our own structure, we have a well-established engagement model within our user group. Through the various events that we run, from our community events to Connect, to the webinars and so forth, or even our annual survey. So that's generally how within UKISUG we would get the feedback from within our membership around issues and challenges that they face. Ultimately, then if we see a common theme or trend, we would feed that back. Through myself, through Connor, who is also part of the SUGEN, or yourself, Craig, to ultimately the user group, a global user group through SUGEN, and figure out, are these challenges common in other market units? And the obvious ones generally tend to emerge. It might be around licensing. It might be around a new initiative in terms of where it's going with artificial intelligence and so forth. But on occasion, it can be very localized, because we all know that in each of our jurisdictions, there'll be local regulatory legal requirements, whether it be from a financial perspective or whatever it happens, and they will be specific and localized to certain market units. And naturally, it might be somewhat different in different areas, but those will be challenges that our members will face. But we'll recognise that they don't necessarily have the same challenge in a different country. So it's trying to differentiate between both of those streams and understanding where we can obviously work with SAP on the solutions, either locally or whether we do it globally through SUGEN.
Oh, thank you. And I think an important aspect of what you said there, is back to the customers themselves, and really just a note for our members. Please make sure you fill in your surveys when they come through to you. Let us have your feedback. Join the community chat, engage with other customers, ask your questions at events, etc. So thank you for that, Philip. And just coming back to you, if I may, Yasmin, do you see real regional differences in what user groups care about? And I suppose, how do you avoid the loudest or perhaps the largest groups dominating the agenda?
Yeah, that's a good question, Craig. And yes, of course, there are definitely regional differences. But I would say they are not really structural differences. If we look at the SAP strategy and the direction of the solutions, here we sometimes see the difference in the time, in the timing, right? Some countries are further ahead. They are more related to innovation. So topics around innovation adoption are probably more important, and also the speed of delivery of innovation. In other countries, we see that customers ask for, or the user groups, that they see more the need of help for the move, for example, from on-premise to the cloud. But in general, it is just a matter of time when the customers in certain countries move to the same question. So I would say, if we look at structural topics, it is similar across the regions. And of course, we also see localization topics, where we really talk about local things, and then we really focus in the specific countries on these localization topics. Sometimes communication is something we handle locally if we talk about local languages. If we talk about local requirements, sometimes the go-to-market, how we approach from an organizational perspective, this is what we definitely handle locally, but this is obvious that this is a local topic. So in general, I think through SUGEN, we have an excellent network and platform for SAP to gather all the user groups together. They all have the same rights. They all have the same amount of members that they are eligible to contribute to this network. And so they have the same chance to raise their voice when they talk to our executive board members or to our executives. And that's the way how we can really ensure that the voice of all the user groups can get heard, and not only the ones that are just the loudest.
Thank you. And if I can come back to you, Philip, to start with on this one, can you point to any specific examples, if you like, where SUGEN collaboration changed something tangible at SAP, and whether that's a product decision, support model, localization, as Yasmin said, maintenance, or knowledge transfer?
Yeah, there's probably four that come to mind, and to be honest, there's lots of smaller ones, and that nudge things in the right direction, that we would work on before they become bigger challenges and maybe issues. But probably one of the biggest ones from the early days of SUGEN would have been around the whole enterprise support model, when that first came in, and the ability to have manage that expectation in terms of what the expectations and desires were within the community. And we saw that very quickly become a global one, and that's probably one of the very first and most notable ones that we had a very strong influence in changing the direction, or certainly the initial direction. Then I remember when Fiori was launched, that was a chargeable product per se, and yet I do recall in the early days in my SUGEN time, the constant challenges that our members would have had around the user experience. And then when Fiori came along, we felt they've solved it. This is great, but yet then became a chargeable. So there was a challenge at that time, that this is what we've been asking for, but now we're expected to pay more for it. And through the collaboration, that became as part of the standard support model, and there was no extra additional charges around Fiori. Don't like to bring it up, but I suppose it was very topical at the time, with the whole concept of indirect access. And that wasn't just SUGEN working on that. That was also with other major user groups which aren't part of SUGEN collaborating with SAP on that particular challenge. And that was a great example, not just where SUGEN came together, but it came together with other major user groups globally. And collectively, we all worked together with SAP and come up with a solution around indirect access. But to move to something more positive, I think, than negative, I remember working on one in relation to innovation. Innovation comes in from technology at a very fast pace, and all our customers need to adopt that, but they need to adopt it at their pace, and they're always concerned about how do they adopt innovation from SAP and the products in a very effective way. And we work together with SUGEN on developing deliverables to help customers find the best path for them to adopt the innovation in an effective and a timely manner. So there is a mix of topics that we work on, which are as a result of a decision that might have been made at SAP that causes a bit of a challenge within membership, right through to things that actually this is something we need to work on that can be of a direct benefit to members and actually customers globally ultimately.
Thank you. And I think the innovation adoption charter was one that was very close to my heart. And I think, that there was so much that came out of that charter for customers and SAP going into the future that we probably couldn't total up everything that actually stemmed from that charter. But Yasmin, anything to add from you?
Yes, of course. But first, I want to also mention, as you just mentioned it, Philip, the indirect access topic, because this was really a remarkable achievement. And I recall the project that we established together with SUGEN and the user group representatives. We really engaged in several workshops where the user group representatives came to Walldorf. We had workshops, and by the way, our CEO Christian Klein was also part in a leading role of this project in his role at that time, and I think we really reached a great success. and great solutions for the customers in this space. But I would like to show some recent examples of collaboration and successful outcomes with the user groups. So just some examples: when SAP announced that we will prioritize public cloud in the early times of our announcements of public cloud solutions, we announced that it would be a public cloud first strategy, and we saw through the user groups that customers started to question if the move to the private cloud would be the right step for them, or if their investments might lead into the wrong direction. So we started to see that customers even became hesitant to do the move to the private cloud, and they questioned this move. So through the dialogue with the user groups, as they made it really clear that they need a commitment for both options, the private and the public cloud option, and SAP did this commitment, and we made it very, very clear that we will invest not only in the public cloud solutions, but equally into the private cloud solutions. And this commitment has even been made during a keynote of SAP at an annual conference of a big user group. So I think this was really a strong message that was important for customers, and where they really waited for it in order to know if their investment is still worth to do into the private cloud. Another recent example is what we just announced during Sapphire, and this is the on-premise connector that we announced, as well as the AI agents that we will deliver to help customers to drive and speed up their transformation. This was also a result of the discussions with the user groups, with SUGEN, and it became clear for SAP that customers want a broader access to SAP innovation, to AI, and that we also need to help them in their transformation. So what we announced here is clearly also a success of the user groups. And also an important change is, of course, the changes of the maintenance timelines of ECC. I think this is also an important step for customers to help them bridge the time and to help them to have a more comfortable move to the cloud with all of their landscape. So these examples demonstrate how the feedback of the user groups is really important for SAP and helps the customers to get really tangible outcomes and realize value through the user groups.
Thank you. And just if I can bring it to the present, what's currently top of the SUGEN agenda that members should know about at the moment, Philip?
Yeah, I think Yasmin touched on some of them, but clearly AI is none of us can avoid it. It's coming from every angle in terms of whatever software solution you're running within your organization, and you can't hardly turn on the radio without hearing something about AI in the public or commercial space. So as Yasmin mentioned, a lot of the key announcements that came out of Sapphire will no doubt be on top of everyone's mind as they try and digest what that means for their organizations and how they can leverage the innovation coming from SAP around AI. I think the other major one is around how organizations adopt different software solutions as required, because not every organization will be wall-to-wall SAP, and they recognize the need to integrate SAP with other non-SAP solutions. So that whole API process about how that integration is seamless and beneficial, and organizations can maximize the value. And there's a recently published AI policy around how that is to work. So those will be aspects about, I think, which will be top of mind over the next 6 to 12 months. AI, APIs, and then just really how they can adopt the agents that Yasmin referred to, whether you're already on S4 and you want to maximize the use of AI, or you're still in that migration path from ECC to S4, and the fact now that you have some agents to even help with that migration process. So depending where you are on your cycle in terms of migration or adoption of the latest products, those are probably the key topics I would imagine that will be top of mind that you can bring through your user group to SUGEN to understand and learn more.
Thank you. And Yasmin, you mentioned kind of the move to the cloud, AI, etc. Philip, you mentioned that AI is hitting us from all angles. And obviously AI has the ability to assimilate information, allow people to get quick access to information. So if I can just look, Yasmin, at, you've run a number of sessions on what members value most by 2030. So if we look at the future towards 2030, and, the answers seem to lean towards human connection, shared experience, etc., rather than just information. What does that mean for how user groups evolve, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, the speed of innovation is something that makes the user groups even more important. That's what I really think. The customers need to be in the position that they can adopt innovation very quickly, because you can see that the delivery of innovation has become so much faster. And if the customers are not in the position to adopt this quickly, then they might, or they have a bigger risk to leave behind. And so the move to cloud is very important, and of course then the dialogue, how we do this, share experiences, and to discuss the best practices. This is something you can always do better in a human exchange. Of course, technology can also be a challenge for user groups, because if we look at the history of the user groups, they originally provide guidance. That's what they do, of course, still. But you can also access certain guidelines and so on through an AI. You can easily just ask an AI agent to get certain recommendations. This is something that was something you got through the user groups. But I think this technology help is not the only thing that user groups provide to their members. The network, the personal interaction is something that you really need in order to be ready for the future. So the user groups have to, on the one side, shift this, and also help the customers to provide this human interaction. And with all technology, and we started in our conversation today by the fact that people exchange through devices, but there is no human interaction. And we should not forget that customers get together in a user group. They share experiences. They expand their personal network. Don't forget the fun factor, right? It's always more fun to connect, to have human interaction, to talk to other people, and also get some inspiration by other customers. So I think this is not only a challenge, it is a great opportunity for the user groups to provide an even better value to their members, and of course also to SAP, because we also need the user groups to get this personal connection to the customers.
Oh, thank you. And Philip, if you were making a case to a customer who's perhaps never engaged with the user group, why should they get involved with UKISUG and, by extension, the SUGEN network?
Yeah, almost the question it's difficult to answer, because it should be so obvious of the benefits that a user group can bring. And when I was, ultimately, we're all about trying to maximize the return on the investment. Any company's made an investment in SAP, they've made that decision, or even if they're about to make that decision, they know they need to adopt the solution to drive value within their organization. And that can be effective or it can be ineffective, and you really want to try and maximize that as much as possible. And there's only so much, I think, that you can get directly from partners, SAP, and the ecosystem. And I think learning from other peers, whether they're in their same industry or not, can be ultimately invaluable, because they live and breathe how they get value from that. And just sharing that knowledge, having that collaboration, when both, whether it be looking for opportunities, trying to solve challenges, is vital. And there's no better way to do that than through some independent community where it's almost like a safe space to bring your issues, challenge, and opportunities. So that's really what a user group is about. There's no other vested interest than just to bring people together to understand where those opportunities are, where those problems are, and then work the solutions. And they can often just do that amongst themselves, but also through the user group you can tap into SAP and the wider ecosystem of partners to help find the answers. And having that alone within UKISUG or any given market unit for the user groups in those particular areas is great. But then when you can be part of a wider network through SUGEN, that especially if they're big opportunities and challenges, that you can bring those to very senior levels through Yasmin's group within SAP, that's bound to make a huge difference. And also therefore be able to provide the reassurance that if you bring it to that attention, that it's going to get listened to, and all being well, it'll get resolved, and you'll get the direct benefit and feedback back from that. So I think, if you're not part of it, it's like everything is, if you're not in, you can't win. And being part of that user group locally, and then by default having a connection into SUGEN, I think it's a win-win for everyone, and I don't see why anyone wouldn't want to be part of that.
Thank you, Philip. And as we come to a close, is there anything either of you would like to add that perhaps we haven't covered, or have we covered everything in this conversation?
I think one thing I'd like to add, SUGEN, from recollection, was commenced around 2007. You might correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And it was a smaller group of user groups, and now it has grown to Yasmin's 23, I think, in total, 24 thereabouts, and we're constantly looking and have interested parties, so to speak, from other countries around the world to be part of SUGEN. So naturally, as it grows, the power and the influence, the knowledge, the ability to interact together will increase, but it's also important that we stay agile and light. And I think the last thing we want to happen is SUGEN to be seen as this huge entity that is too slow to get anything done. So I think it's really, ultimately, as we move forward, trying to find that fine balance. Obviously what we want to convey back to our members is that we don't want them to see it as some untouchable entity that they can't be part of. You're part of it by being part of our membership. And, if you join as a member of any user group globally, and that user group's part of SUGEN, you're part of that network by default. And it's incumbent, I suppose, on us, Craig, within UKISUG specifically, as soon as we've got great deliverables and outputs coming from SUGEN, that we make sure we feed those back to our members through our community events, whether it be papers, publications on our website. Very often when we're working on concepts and charters and projects within SUGEN, they do need to be under maybe an NDA because it's very sensitive, and until it becomes public, we can say very little. But certainly it's important then when it does, when those deliverables are produced and we are allowed obviously to publish that we do that effectively, and that then people consume that, but also provide the feedback where maybe they feel we haven't gone far enough, or even if we have gone, give us an acknowledgement to say that, yeah, this is great, because only that positive feedback as well can allow us to understand, well, we know how we worked on that, we want to replicate how we successfully achieved that objective when it comes to the next challenge and opportunity.
Thank you, Philip. And the final words for you, Yasmin.
Yeah, I would like to thank every single person who engages with the user groups, the people who are members of user groups and attend the conferences and the various events and SIG lead meetings, and really engage with SAP in a non-sales related context to gather information, to share experiences, and to also benefit for themselves, of course. This is really tremendously important for SAP. It's a great opportunity for SAP also to get their feedback, to understand the customers much better. So it really helps to make all of us more successful. And I really want to thank all the volunteers who spend their time and who invest themselves and bring so much passion and engagement into the work of the user groups. This is something we are really, really proud of, and we value that you all do this, because it's nothing that is a given, and we really appreciate this. So thank you very much to all the volunteers for making SAP and the customer world a little bit better.
Oh, thank you. And it reminds me of an old proverb, I think. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, go together. And I think, to all our listeners out there, join your local user group. So if you're in the UK and Ireland, visit sapusers.org and join us. But Yasmin, Philip, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. I really do appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. My
pleasure. And to our listeners, I hope you found that conversation valuable. I hope, thank you for listening. And please make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay connected.